Okay, so what exactly is the Fierce Attack problem? In a nutshell, here's the too long didn't read version, right? Call of Dragons is a game in which you're always going to have power creep. Heroes get stronger and stronger, war pets get stronger and stronger, but Fierce Attack does not have a scaling mechanism, so Fierce Attack always stays the same. Okay, now here's the longer version. As you're probably aware, Fierce Attack is one of the additional damage packages you can put on pet. It's a physical damage-based source, so it will technically work with any Cav March, it'll work with any Archer March, it's going to work with any Infantry March. However, it's the package that's really designed for Cav Marches. Now, like I said, you can use it with Infantry and Archers, and you see it there sometimes, but predominantly it is for Cav Marches, okay? Fierce Attack is a 3-card package, as you know. The base damage, the base skill goes off whenever your Deputy casts a Rage skill, but only has a base 40% trigger chance. You can increase that trigger chance with the Pet Shop skill Intense Fierce Attack. If you have it 3 stars, and if you have near maximum luck, you can get near 100% on this. Okay, the other skill is Advanced Fierce Attack. That's the Amber skill. Advanced Fierce Attack increases the damage output of Fierce Attack and only Fierce Attack. So what's the issue? Well, the issue is that the war pets have gotten stronger and stronger, but Fierce Attack has stayed the same. Fierce Attack lacks a scaling mechanism that the other pet damage packages have. I'll talk about them in a later video. But Fierce Attack is a fixed damage source, and so as the game power creeps up over time, Fierce Attack becomes less and less relevant. Okay, I'm going to give you some numbers here, and the numbers I'm going to give you all assume essentially best case scenario. For example, I'm going to assume everything's 3-starred like on this pet here. I'm going to assume the stats are maxed out. Obviously on this pet the stats are not maxed out, but the numbers I'm going to give you assume maxed out stats. And then if the skill has a trigger condition, for example, Arrogance here, once you get Fierce Marks, I'm going to assume whatever condition you have gets max Fierce Marks. The only exception to this is some war pets will hit multiple targets. And in the case of multiple targets, I'm going to give you the breakdown if it hits 1 target, if it hits 2 targets, if it hits 3 targets, etc. Okay? Okay, we'll just start with Fierce Attack. And if you have Fierce Attack by itself, maxed out, 3 stars, max strength, it has a damage factor of only about 212. Not that impressive, right? If you add Advanced Fierce Attack and only Advanced Fierce Attack, the damage factor goes up to about 323. Okay. If you add Intense Fierce Attack and only Intense Fierce Attack, so you have Fierce Attack and Intense, but not Advanced, the damage factor goes up to 530. I think that's a pretty good demonstration why Intense Fierce Attack is better than Advanced Fierce Attack, but leaving that aside. And then if you have all 3 maxed out, your damage factor is about 808. Okay, 808, remember that number. And I'm going to compare that number, 808, to all the Cav pets, right? Because Fierce Attack really is the Cav Attack package. So let's look at the G1 Cav pet. That's the Golden Rock. If you have these 3 skills maxed out, all the exuberant skills maxed out with max stats, but no additional skills like Blood Roar or Fatal Bite or anything like that, the damage factor on the Golden Rock is 818, okay? Pretty comparable to Fierce Attack, and you can see why you'd sort of want to do a hybrid approach. When we talk about the Berserk Feydrake, if you have all 3 of these maxed out, the damage factor is 1118, okay? A bit better than Fierce Attack, but still in the ballpark, still sort of competitive with it, okay? When we go to the G3 Cav pet, the Blade Manticore, Blade Manticore is a little interesting, right? Because it hits up to 3 targets. It doesn't hit that hard, but obviously the AoE gives it some advantage. So against a single target with all the Gleaming Blades maxed out, your damage factor is only 503, okay? Against 2 targets, the damage factor goes up to 1007, and against 3 targets, the damage factor becomes 1511. Kind of makes sense, right? You can see that the damage factor essentially has linear progression. 1511 for 3 targets, best case scenario. That's okay. I was always kind of underwhelmed with the Blade Manticore, okay? But things really changed when we got to the G4 Cav pet. That's the Auric Warhound. The Auric Warhound can hit up to 2 targets, okay? Against a single target, the damage factor on the Auric Warhound is 1231. And against 2 targets, the damage factor on the Auric Warhound gets up to 2093, okay? A pretty substantial increase over the single target approach, right? And then finally, we have the G5 cat, the Bullying Beast. The Bullying Beast, it only can hit a single target, but it does a lot of damage. If you have just these 3 guys maxed out, the damage factor on the Bullying Beast is 1692. All right, and I pulled all these numbers off of Warpet Calculator. Like I've said before, the Warpet calculators, they're an excellent tool. You know, there's some slight variation between them, but they all pretty consistently say the same thing. So these numbers, maybe they're not 100% accurate 100% of the time, but they are a good indication, and they certainly give you an indication on the strength of these Warpets. Which really brings us back to the problem here, right? On the early Cav Pets, some of the unique skills related to that Cav Pet weren't that good. For example, Goldenrok here, Exuberance, gives you passion, and then if you have passion, you deal damage. Advanced Exuberance is just a straight damage increase, but if you take a look at Intense Exuberance here, it gives you rage and also heals your Legion when you cast Exuberance. I mean, these things are nice, but they're not directly on plan, right? They don't increase the damage factor of the Exuberance. So if you're going all in on the Exuberance skill, you can skip Intense Exuberance. It doesn't increase the damage of it, maybe indirectly through a little additional rage generation, but it doesn't make your pet directly hit harder, right? And you saw a similar thing with the G2 pet, Berserk Phaedrake here. I did a breakdown on this pet a long time ago, but the bottom line here is the Pet Shop skill, Intense Arrogance. It basically gives you additional stacks of Fierce Mark, but the way it works out is Intense Arrogance, at least at the time, it literally only worked for Ferandil. It additionally works for Freya as well, but Freya has a better pet, so you don't typically use a Berserk with Freya. And the bottom line is, if you're using this pet with Ferandil, most of the time you max out stacks anyway. And so this additional skill here, it basically only works for Ferandil, and Ferandil doesn't need it. So you could skip Intense Arrogance pretty easily on the G2 Cav pet, right? And because both the G1 and G2 Cav pets had pet-specific skills that frankly weren't that good, you could skip them, all right? And then you'd put, just the 2 pet skills on here, the full damage boosting package like Tooth and Claw, Blood Roar, etc. And then you'd skip Advanced Fierce Attack because that's also just not that impressive. And so you'd go the full damage package plus 2 pet skills plus 2 Fierce Attack skills, and everything worked pretty great, okay? The problem is by the time we get to the G4, G5 Cav pets, all their skills are increasing the damage of their main skill, and their main skill is just so strong, you want to focus everything on that. So you go with the 3 pet skills, the 4 additional, damage boosters, and then you have 1 slot left over if you have an 8-slot pet. And what do you do with that last slot? I mean, I guess you put Fierce Attack in it because there's nothing else to put there, but you don't put any additional Fierce Attack boosters to it. So this thing only has a 40% chance whenever I do a rage skill with my deputy. That's fine, right? Because I could the next worst skill on here is Tooth and Claw, and if I cut Tooth and Claw for Intense Fierce Attack to give this a better trigger chance, I get a significant DPS downgrade. And so the bottom line is, if you have 8 skill slots, Fierce Attack is the last thing on there, but it's just not impressive. And if you're building a Cav pet out with the new Cav G4, G5 Cav pets out, and you get a great 7-slot roll, keep it. You do not need the 8 slot to put Fierce Attack on here. Here's my Auric Warhound. This thing does just fine. And so here we are, right? We're as the game keeps progressing, as we get stronger and stronger heroes, we're still left with the same old pet package. The bottom line here is what I would like to see the developers do is reinvigorate the pet system, give us some new skills, give us some new variety, because we're getting to the point where every pet's going to be the same build, especially as the pets get stronger, the heroes get stronger, but the pet cards stay the same. Now, like I mentioned earlier, some of the other pet skills, for example, Chain Strike, have sort of internal scaling mechanisms with it that make them less susceptible to this. It's the worst with Fierce Attack. It's pretty bad with Follow Up, and it's not so bad with the Chain Strike and Counter Strike packages. But it's an issue with everyone, and so, like I said in an earlier video, I'd really like to see an update to the pet skill system. All right? Anyway, that's all I got for you today. And until next time, you stay classy, Bellrun.